Hey, everybody. It's been such a pleasure doing my live Q&A Zoom call with my friend Igor Limansky, participant on season 9 of Alone. And what great questions. A lot of questions about logistics and things we didn't see on camera out there. A lot of things about the ways he spent his time that were too hard to record or didn't make the final cut. And a lot of really wonderful advice for what one could do a little bit differently going out there. And a lot of the things that he learned about the place, about the experience, and about himself.
Hey there.
Hey.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Igor, what was something that they didn't show in the final episodes that you really, really wish the viewers had got to see about your time out?
Yeah, I think they kind of covered the site and kind of the challenges that came with the site. They covered a little bit the challenges with fishing. So they showed the fishing and the, I think that was the only time I actually got to catch a seal on video, but just how often I was fishing and how kind of the seals would pop up and kind of mock me and then swim back into the river, not to anthropomorphize them, but yeah, just the challenge of, going into it, I'd really thought like fish was going to be a thing that was going to be a main food source for me, and to spend that much time fishing and to not catch anything and to eventually just kind of give up on it because either there weren't a lot of fish or I was being outfished by the seals. That was a really big part of my time out there, as well as just the hunting and setting snares. I'm guessing they didn't show up because I was unsuccessful and all of that, but I think something I would have liked to see is just more of a rounded out view of how I was spending my time there. But overall, I was actually really happy with the episode, and I thought they did a really great job of portraying my time out there. And I did find 2 other mussels, so round that up to 3. And it was interesting because they were all in the exact same spot, and so I was like convinced that there was some sort of like bed there, but there wasn't. They just kind of came in with a tide and got caught up in some of the seaweed. But yeah, I think those are kind of the main things that I wish they would have shown.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I had something similar where I fished a ton out there, but I never got anything. And so they just left that all out. And that's really hard because the viewers, people will really lay into like, oh, well, if only you had tried fishing. Hello, duh. And you're like, ha ha, I actually filmed hundreds of hours. And anyway, so yeah, it can be frustrating for sure. I'm really glad you got more than the one mussel. It was also amazing seeing the impact of that one mussel on you. Was it your first mussel that they showed?
I think that was the first mussel, yeah, and I found 2 others. But it was, yeah. I mean, it's such a treat. I got obsessed with mussels when I got home.
Yeah. Understandably so. I actually sent Igor a picture of my family and I having mussels for dinner on Saturday night because made me think of him. But that's something that I really thought about with your site too, Igor, because it's very clear from you having access to all this seaweed and nobody else having it, and the seals and just the pan in on your site, that you were really close to the ocean. And to have seaweed and mussels, your water must have been brackish, which makes me really wonder what the fish populations were like in your spot versus elsewhere. I don't know
Sure.
if brook trout can handle brackish water.
I don't know either. I mean, the challenge of being that close to the ocean was, it definitely threw me off. And I think, I'm grateful for my experience, and I feel like I learned a lot from it. And, from a lone TV show survival sense, I definitely just like made a lot of mistakes. Like, I think the first 4 days that I spent was kind of like me not really accepting that was the site I was in. I was really convinced that I was gonna like find, a patch of like dry, flat land that I would be able to build a shelter on. And I think I just kept convincing myself that if I scouted out my territory long enough, that I would find the right spot. And in hindsight, I think it probably would have been better just accept that I had a boggy, rocky, site and just, do what I did anyway after 4 days, and it's just kind of build, on the site the way it was. But yeah, it was definitely surprising to me, and was also one of the reasons why I thought I should build a bigger shelter. Because the closer you are to the coast, obviously, the more intense the winds are. And so I was a little concerned about that. But shelter definitely, or site location plays a big part of anyone's experience. And I'm sure anyone who was on alone who didn't have beavers are pretty upset that their site didn't have beaver dens on them. And so I think there's always there's always ways your site could have been better, but it definitely changed the way I approach the situation, having to find small streams to get water, and obviously having to contend with a seal population that close to the coast.
As always, please remember to subscribe to my channel, like the video, and hit the little notifications bell, and check out my Patreon membership. We've still got, I think, 5 season 9 participants coming on our Q&A calls live for my Patreon members.
What of your 10 gear items was the most critical for your time out?
So I think it was my most critical, and it was probably one that I'm not sure if I'd take again, which is a weird thing to say. But the saw that I had was so helpful that I think it was somewhat of a detriment. Because if I didn't have that saw, I wouldn't have been able to cut down the trees, the size of trees that I did, because there's no way I would have been able to do that with an axe.
Yeah.
And so the saw was super helpful because it allowed me to fell these really big trees, and then to essentially make a shelter that was the size that I was making it. But if I didn't have my saw, then I would have never attempted to do that because it just wouldn't have been possible. So in some ways, my saw was the most helpful, and the one that I honestly question whether I would have brought it.
Yeah, interesting. That's a great answer. So the next part of the question is, what is one that you could have done without? And so maybe it's the same gear item.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, those were some huge trees. That was a pretty serious undertaking. I would have destroyed my back, that's for sure.
Oh my God, I completely overdid it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was yeah, just a mistake.
I talked about that in terms of, we've seen people be successful with really overbuilt shelters. And what I always think about is Roland Welker, who is moving these enormous rocks and trees. And watching that, I'm thinking, this is the worst idea ever, because the chances for injury and the calories. But I think he was, kind of one of those tough guys trying to show how tough he was, and it worked for him and he did well. So I feel like in some ways it's given this impression that these really beefy overbuilt shelters are a good way to go. And other, like Randy also built a log cabin in season 5, and so other folks have done it and gotten away with it. And I feel like it can give the impression that it's a great way to go, when actually I think it's never the best way to go, because it's just, the rewards are potentially great, but the risks are so much bigger. And we've seen a ton of people never finish their ambitious shelters.
Yeah,
So it's a common thing.
yeah, I'll definitely say that would not be the shelter I would go for now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Hindsight. I mean,
Hindsight for sure, right?
I would never go out without snare wire now.
Yeah.
So you never know. And what worked in one location could be totally different in another location. And who knows, maybe you'll get another opportunity in the future. One never knows.
We'll see. That'd be cool.
Yeah. What food were you eating that we never saw on camera? Was there anything, or did we see all of your 4 moments of
No, like everybody else, bunch berries were everywhere. And so I had a ton of bunch berries. Up in the mountains where I hiked the first few days, there was a ton of blueberries. There was some blackberries. Um, gosh, there was the tic tac berries. I can't remember what you call them. Micro, super teeny. They're white and they
They're
taste
kind of wintergreen flavored,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
It tastes just like a tic tac. Lots of berries, and then some mushrooms. Slippery jacks were all I found that were still edible that I could identify. There was obviously a ton of mushrooms that I couldn't identify, and that I stayed away from. But as far as the edible kinds, it was yeah, mostly slippery jacks, which were at the edge of still edible.
What was something that surprised you about the recovery process? Something that you weren't expecting that affected you after your time out?
That feeling of having such a clean body
Mhm.
where, for 2 months before going out on the show, I tried to have 0 sugar, had no caffeine, no alcohol, just, like, nothing, no sort of toxins in my body, and
Mhm.
then couple that with essentially a 20-day seaweed fast, and then, like, the recovery out, like, my body was just so sensitive to foods and to tastes and, um yeah, to, like, indulge in something like a cigarette and a glass of whiskey, it was, like, the first time I'd ever, like, had a cigarette and a glass of whiskey in my life, and yeah, the way my body just got super sensitive to smells and toxins and tastes and all of that,
Mhm.
um, that was definitely something I'd never experienced before and was pretty incredible. Yeah, I think I had, like, 3 puffs of that cigarette, that was it.
Do you want me to edit that out or can I share that? Because
Oh, you can for
it's
sure share
hilarious.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And was that after you got home or while you were still on the way back?
It was after I got home.
Okay.
Um, I think I tried to have a little bit of wine in St. John's with dinner, and I just couldn't do it.
What part of your time in Labrador changed you the most and in what way?
I always thought I was someone who made smart decisions under pressure. My time in Labrador definitely challenged some of my notions of how calm and logical I can remain in a tricky situation. And I noticed, even like my decision on, like, I think it was day 2, to go away from the river where I was dropped off to the river that was, like, across the way, you know, thinking back logically, I don't think that that was the smartest decision, right? And I think there's a number of decisions where, uh, I think in hindsight, they seem like I could have made smarter ones. And I think there's definitely this concept I have of myself as being able to stay really cool under challenging situations and making the smart call. And that definitely shook that idea for me, where I now I'll spend more time examining how to, like, really lean more into my logic, than I did, and maybe think through a problem with a little more intelligence and maybe a little less gut feeling in some ways.
I feel like a lot of people come to more intuition when they're out there. So that's interesting. And I hear you. It makes sense. So what is the take home message that you would like to leave people with about your experience in Labrador?
I actually really loved, some of the things that came up in the show that they wove into the story. The idea of a ritual not necessarily being a rite of passage, not necessarily being what we want it to be, but being what it is, and being able to not have regrets in the experience, but to really honor it for what it is, and the learnings from that, I think, is a really important lesson. Um, Kind of to what I was just saying about logic and intuition going hand in hand. I really do feel like in some ways I was really focused on the spiritual and didn't focus enough on the physical. And just that realization of how much those are interdependent on each other feels really critical for my journey, and I think it's one of the things that I'm really taking away from it.
I feel like we've already touched on a lot of the other questions too, like would you do it again and what changes would you make? For sure, you
I
would.
would do it again in a heartbeat, for so many reasons. One is, I just want another shot. Like there's just something about, um, yeah, there's just something about that opportunity to be in the woods and to, like, have a lot of moments of deep self-discovery. Yeah, it's pretty unique in that, as someone who, like, really values self-discovery and really values, um, their time on meditation retreats and my time, solo hunting in the woods, to be able to be on a show like that is an opportunity that I'm really grateful for and would, do again in a heartbeat.
Did you feel good about the ways that you prepared for the Alone experience?
For the most part, I felt really good about the way I prepared. I didn't have luck snaring, but I felt like I understood how to snare and I set up a lot of snares and I felt really good about that. Um, I feel like fly fishing is just something I don't do much of, and I certainly could have spent more time prepping for that. This is kind of an obvious one, but just learning to make different types of shelters. So I would have had more kind of ideas of different ways I could have done it. I think that would have been really helpful. But overall, I think I was pretty happy with the skill set that I brought into it and felt good about it. Um, and definitely would have liked to round out some of my areas around fishing and shelter building.
What advice would you give someone else who is preparing to go out on the road?
I was so clear with myself before going out about how much energy I was going to conserve. Like just like I'm not going to break a sweat. I'm going to go really slow. I'm going to prioritize things that like are really efficient. And it's crazy how quick that went out the window for me. And so, in hindsight, and for people who might be going out on the show, I think I would say really try and stick to that. Really ask yourself if this is worth the exchange of calories. And is there a slower and more efficient way to do what I'm trying to do?
I don't usually go the conservative, slow, efficient way either. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean,
I think it costs me more than it costs you, though, when I'm out there
I
in
think
some
that's
ways. Yeah.
true. Yeah. The floor is yours. So by all means, please share with us anything that didn't get asked that feels really important to share.
As far as projects that I'm working on now, something that I was really surprised that didn't show up in the edit was I probably spend at least an hour to 2 hours a day meditating out there. And, it was so my wife and I, my meditation group, we all kind of decided to sync up an hour after sunset in Labrador. So we were all meditating together,
Mm.
which was really wonderful. And yeah, just meditation was a big part of my journey out there. I've been practicing Zen Buddhist for almost 17 years now. And so I think I was just surprised that that didn't make it on the show because it was such a big part of my story, my relationship to the outdoors, my daily life. Um, but I'll also say that I'll be co-leading a meditation and wilderness retreat with Diane Hamilton, who is a Zen Roshi and one of my favorite Zen teachers. She's got a beautiful Zen temple down in Torrey, Utah. And so we're going to be, she's actually doing a 3-week retreat. And the third week we'll be co-leading together and we'll be kind of a camping slash Zen meditation retreat. Yeah, a film project. So I saw that someone asked in the questions, "Am I a filmmaker?" I certainly that seems like a really grandiose title. So no, but I am making a film. So I don't know if that makes me a filmmaker. Yeah, I spent some time in Egypt, almost 2 months. Really focused on ancestry and tradition. My mom and her father are Coptic, which are the indigenous Christian people of Egypt, and to go there and spend time with their traditions and kind of learn their stories. It was just a big part of my trip out there and kind of my life in general. And so I'm hoping to. I'm not sure if I got enough footage while I was out there to actually edit a feature documentary, or if it's just going to be a trailer and a little pilot. But that will be coming out hopefully by the end of summer.
I think that's most of what I wanted to cover, and it's getting on, and it's solstice, and we should both go and celebrate these last hours of sun on the longest day of the year. Thank you so much. This has been really delightful, and I love that that the first of these calls is with you because being a part of your alone journey was so meaningful and brought me so much joy. So yeah, I wish we got to see more of you out there, but I just feel like your journey had so much depth to it, and that connection to place just came through so much more strongly than so many people who spend a lot of time, like people who are out longer seem to have a lot less connection and reverence than I saw in you. So I feel like it's really not about the length of time, it's about how deep you go, right? And how strong that connection is. So I just feel like you brought it so strongly from the very get-go, and it just really came through. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Onia. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.